from what I understand, though, in researching all this, you did have bad dreams. You started
Oh
having
yeah.
nightmares.
Yeah, I had nightmares. I had some pretty serious nightmares. In almost all of them, it involved either my children or my family. It was always very personal in that sense. I did not have dreams of, oh, I'm wandering through hell per se, or I'm in, being jabbed with pitchforks by demons, or I'm up in flames. It was almost always terrible things happening in my family, and it was almost in every case I was the one doing it, which was a lot more traumatic because some of them were so real. And when I woke up and the one that I described one in the book, that was probably the worst. And it was one of the, I think it was one of the last ones I had, but where I thought there was an intruder in my house. I thought there was someone in my house, and I stabbed them right in the chest. And then when I looked up, it was my son. And my son in the dream gave me this look that, like, oh mom, it's okay, I know I'm going to die, but I still love you. And that image stayed with me. I mean, it's been 20 some years, I can still picture it. I mean, it was really, really traumatic. And then there were other dreams too of me, poisoning their food or setting traps for the kids or watching them suffer, where I would come upon them, being attacked by a dog or whatever. And I would just sort of stand by and be like, oh, well, they're getting attacked by a dog. And it was pretty disturbing.
Yeah, well, I would imagine that somehow you managed to open up something like a really the thing that would get you the most. Like
Yeah,
walking through a fiery pit would probably not be that scary
right,
to you
right.
personally. So of
Yeah.
course it wouldn't.
And I think too, one cleric had said to me, sometimes the scariest thing in our lives is really facing our own depths of depravity. Like sometimes that's really fearsome, is to think, oh my gosh, how much evil am I personally capable of? That is a very frightening thing to contemplate, whether you believe in the afterlife or not. Everybody likes to think, oh, we're nice people and we wouldn't do bad things, but everybody has at least some capacity to do something wrong. And to really sit down and think, well, what exactly is my, how deep does that well go? That's a scary thing. And I imagine that was part of it too. And then, as you said, especially as a new mom, the idea of my kids being hurt was a lot more visceral and painful than, like you're saying, than any kind of physical torture, going walking through fire, getting, stabbed or whatever. But yeah, the idea of it was just, it was something that really struck pretty hard. And then, of course, there's always the question of, it's the whole, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Would I have had the nightmares if I hadn't been warned, oh my gosh, you're going to have terrible nightmares? So there, it was sort of like a cycle of these, these negative pictures and images definitely going through my mind, the reality that, oh, this is probably going to affect me. And then when they did affect me, it was sort of like reinforcing the whole, oh, you've been warned, but you did it anyway. And that's what I'm saying. It was sort of like a cycle. But yeah, that was pretty much ongoing for, it took a couple of years to write the Heaven and Hell books. I researched them at the same time, just because with the original sources there was so much overlap. I'm not going to get in an appointment with a cleric to talk about heaven, and then come say, can I come back 6 weeks later and talk about hell? So we were just sort of talking about everything. And then when I got home, I sort of separated my research out. And that's why it took, people say, oh, well, why did it take, 2 or 3 years? That's really why, because I was doing them at the same time. But obviously the hell immediately emerged as soon as I started doing the research. Hell emerged as the one that was going to be much more information available, much more visual, much more, I don't want to say, I always say interesting, and I joke that heaven's boring. But what I mean by that is hell fires the imagination in a way heaven does not. When people think about heaven, you can go to any culture, any religion, they tend to think about the same kinds of things. I'm with my family and my loved ones. I am not sick anymore. Everything is, I have a perfect body that I don't have to worry about bad things. When you talk about hell, it runs the gamut, just the absolute gamut.
Well, I
The early church knew that. In Christian times, they used to have those passion plays where they would, do stories from the Bible. And the people putting on the shows noticed right away that when they do, the heaven and the angels, the people sit in their seats and they kind of pay attention, but they, you can tell they're sort of sitting there. But when the devil showed up, people were jumping up and down, they were cheering, they couldn't get enough of it. And that's just part of the human condition, always has been.
Yeah, well, that's one of the interesting things about the history of the church is really people. I don't think people would have gone if those stories weren't what they are, and it's the same reason people watch true crime shows.
Exactly. Yeah. I think Clive Barker said people love to be scared because it makes them think, like, first of all, get your heart racing, makes you know you're alive. But I think he said too that you kind of know from your personal experience there's bad stuff out there. But being scared kind of makes you think, well, if all the really dark stuff is true, maybe the good stuff is true too. And so a scare kind of reminds us of that. But you're right. I mean, it's definitely it's a pulse racer.